What is this? Playback speed. If I increase this, does it increase our actual speed in real life? I'm not going to try. I've already got the setup. It would be disastrous if we sped up. That was a sister rhyme. Hello and welcome to Fools and Fiction. We are the Fools, and this week the fiction is Celeste Chapter 9. So we talked about Celeste in the past, but they, about a year after it was released, I believe, they have a DLC that we recently completed, or I recently completed. Joe completed it a long time ago.
It's been out for like a week. I wouldn't describe it as a long time ago.
Okay. But like I completed it like 2 or 3 days ago.
Yeah, that's fair.
Anyway, so I think it's alright if we have spoilers on this.
Yeah, I mean, by necessarily.
Yeah.
It's going to have spoilers.
So, for those of you who didn't listen to our first Celeste episode or don't know what Celeste is, it is a platformer, story-based, where you're following the character Madeline, who's climbing up a mountain in the same vein as Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy, except
Easier.
Although I think Chapter 9 is harder, but we can get into that. And she's climbing up the mountain, and she's dealing with her inner demons, and there's all sorts of wacky stuff going on, and at the end she gets up the mountain. In Chapter 9, like, a big question I had going into it was, like, what are they going to add? Because they already kind of had this epilogue chapter already, where, I don't even remember what happened in Core. What happens in Core?
She gets closer to battling.
Yeah.
But yeah, Farewell was really interesting because going into it, like, it had started out as just, like, a couple of levels that they were putting in as, like, a celebration of Celeste. Yeah, as DLC. And then Matt posted, I think, like, hey, sorry it's taken so long and, like, we've overshot all of our target goals, but that's because we just, like, couldn't stop making more game. So sorry about that, but Farewell is going to have, like, over 100 rooms. And everyone in the community was like, what? 100 rooms? Like, how? And having played it, like, it doesn't feel like that much in the sense that, like, it doesn't feel like it drags on too long.
No, yeah, that's true. It is very long. It took me 21 hours, I think, to beat it. Or no, it took me 19 hours.
It took me somewhere around probably 10 hours to beat it.
I think that's about the population mean.
And I will say I'm, like, pretty decent at this game. So it's hard, but it's really fun. But the other thing was Farewell had started out without having plot. That it was just going to be some chapters. And then they were like, we added some plot, and then it turned into we added a lot of plot, and it's, like, really important for the development of this character. So,
yeah, so
enjoy.
The basic idea is Madeline has already conquered a good deal of her inner demons on the mountain, and she's already become closer to Madeline, who is this other version of her. And so it's like, what's left? Well, what happens at the very beginning is the beloved... she's not beloved by me. But
she's beloved by me.
The semi-beloved grandmother character, Granny, is her canonical name, dies at the beginning of Chapter 9. And
it's the starkest reveal ever, because you start off on, like, this flat ground, and you see, like, you're walking towards the right, and you see Granny off at the right, and you're like, oh, I'll go talk to her. And then there's a
it goes...
Yeah, there's
a gravestone.
Yeah, there's a crack of lightning, and there's a gravestone after a trigger. And first of all, that's a hell of a way to start off a DLC by killing one of the characters. And so what follows is
it's like the main mechanic is that Madeline thinks that this bird is a manifestation of Granny, so she's trying to find the bird and get it to reveal Granny, I suppose. Which makes a little more sense. It's not totally insane, given some context later, spoilers, which is that it's inside a dream.
Yeah, so Chapter 9 is the only explicitly metaphorical part of Celeste. Like,
except for the dream chapter.
Well, even part of Dream is real.
Yeah, that's true.
And, like, because Madeline appears in Dream, but also appears elsewhere, like, maybe it's real. But the like, we talked a bit about last time when we were talking about Celeste, about how a lot of it seems to be a metaphor, but you can't really know. Like, maybe the mountain is really magical.
Well, we know the mountain is really magical.
But yeah, to what extent is, like, up to debate. But this is, like, purely not happening. And you don't find that out until... I think you catch the bird.
No, I don't think so. Right, no. I think Madeline explains that it's a dream. Madeline's like, go away, and then she catches the bird. And then she's like, oh god, I accidentally heard the bird. What am I doing? And
then Madeline is like, it's a dream, dog.
And then of course, now that she is wise upon learning that it's a dream, she's like, well, the bird is trapped here, so I gotta let it out. And so I've got to turn off the electricity to this level, which is, of course, the most rational thought a character can have. But I guess it's the kind of thought you have in a dream. The rest of the chapter after that is turning off the electricity so that the bird can leave the dream. Which, I mean, it's a bird in a dream, but whatever.
Yeah, and then at the very end, like, huge spoilers, you meet Granny.
Dream Granny.
Dream Granny. And Madeline is like, but you're not real, like, this isn't gonna be cathartic, in like, way less, complex words. And, Granny is like, so what if I'm not real? Like, that didn't stop you from getting here. All this stuff before it. And it had, like, a lot to say about death and, like, how it affects people and, like, obligations, because Madeline didn't go to the funeral.
Right,
that's like established really on. And she was, like, so sad about it. And then Granny is like, what do I care? I'm dead. Like, funerals are for the living.
I think that's one of the big things in Chapter 9, the big realizations.
Yeah, which is, like, I feel like it's something you always know, just, like, expressing it and realizing it is really hard.
Yeah.
So, like, and then after that, she wakes up. And we hadn't seen anyone, so the only 3 people we had ever seen in the chapter thus far were Granny, Madeline, and Madeline. And I guess the bird, but, like, maybe that's Granny.
No, it's not even a bird. It's a dream bird.
Well, yeah, but, like, is it a dream representation of Granny? God only knows.
Yeah.
And then she wakes up and she Skypes Theo, who is still the best character in the game. And they talk about, like, how Madeline's doing. And the room in which Madeline, like, her room has a bunch of really small Easter egg things. Like, it has her journal and her meds there, and she has the gay and trans flags,
yeah,
I believe. I'm not good with flags because I'm not good with colors, so I'm just like, what flag is this? God only knows. But yeah, she has that, and they just talk about how her life is going, and, like, hey, Theo's very much like, hey, I'm here for you, like, just let me know when you need help.
I think the big lesson that I got from Chapter 9, and from, I guess, there even being a Chapter 9, is that, like, and I mean, of course, this is something that people know, but it's one of those cases where playing through a game for 19 hours kind of helps solidify the idea in your mind that, like, even when you make progress on yourself as a person and you become a better person, it's not like, well, now I've leveled up. It's not like a single number. It's more like a vector or a tensor or something. I just came from class mech.
You could say a spectrum.
No, not a spectrum.
Really?
But, like, there's all these different angles at which you can become a better person.
Oh, okay.
Even if you've all these different directions, maybe.
Yeah.
So, like a vector. Even if you have become a better person in, say, confronting your inner demons, like Madeline does in the main game, you still can be a total dipshit when it comes to, like, dealing with death which is how chapter 9 goes. So the fact that Madeline was just like so insistent that this bird was actually Granny, which didn't make any sense. I guess one, it's justified because it's in a dream, so it's like dream logic, but also I think it's, it just shows that Madeline is like still improving herself in different ways, and that's a thing that can happen to people, is that you can, I guess I'm just restating the same thing again, but yeah.
I think it's also really important in the context of mental health, because like that's very obviously the point of Celeste, and they talk about it constantly about like anxiety and stuff like that, and that for listeners, I fidget a lot with things, and there are some rubber bands on the tables, and I accidentally shot one like into the wall. But the thing is, Madeline, like over chapters 1 through 7, gets better at like coping with mental health and dealing with the anxiety and like the quote dark side of her. Mm-hmm. And in chapter 8, it shows like that you can still make progress, which I think is like a really important thing. And it's something that I've had like therapists tell me constantly, is that, you know, just because you're having better days than you used to be having doesn't mean like you still can't progress. Like there isn't a plateau for mental health.
I think that's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah. And then chapter 9 shows that like mental health isn't just like one thing.
That there's all these different directions you can improve yourself.
And it also isn't like static, which is the thing, because like you'll see this a lot with like I have this a lot where like I'm a lot better at managing my anxiety, but there'll be things that like just really set me off. Like exams time is like a huge problem for me, because it just makes me stress, and like there are just days that I can't eat and like can't sleep, and terrible stuff. But it also shows you that like there are ways to get through that too, and they'll be different than what you do for the other stuff.
But you can use some of the same techniques, which I think kind of ties into the mechanics of chapter 9, which is that a lot of times, like for the majority of it, especially the second half, you're using the same techniques you use to climb the mountain, but in this vastly different landscape.
Yeah, they only introduced like 3 new things in chapter 9.
And most of them have to deal more with the environment than with the actual movement of the character.
Well, 2 of them are environmental, the pufferfish and the jellyfish. Mm-hmm. And then one of them is just a different way of looking at the interaction between Madeline and Madeline with the Double Dash crystal. Mm-hmm. And so really, nothing about the game has changed. You're just learning new things and getting better at harder problems, which I think is a really good way to make it an allegory.
Yeah. And so if you like what I did, finish chapter 7 and chapter 8 and the main part of the game, and think there's no way like Madeline has leveled up, which I mean literally happens. But if you take that too literally, I suppose, then it's like, how could there be a chapter 9? Madeline's already had the character development. You can't think of character development like a line or like a spectrum. You can only think of it, I think, in terms of... sorry if I'm stating this metaphor again and again, but these different vectors, these different directions. And so, like, suppose in real life, if you're like, you just had some big realization that took you a long time, and you like suddenly become kinder or something. Like suppose that's a thing that happens. That doesn't mean you're going to be any better at, say, like social interactions or at doing your homework, you know? So like if you find that you're doing worse at those things, don't think of that as necessarily a regression. Just be like, oh, that's where I am on my, I guess, like the JoJo's stand skill diagram. That's like, it's like a different shape.
The big nerd reference I have for this is that it shows that mental health is like a divergent series, but it builds slowly. So you know how like 1 plus 1/2 plus 1/3, that eventually diverges. It just grows to infinity. And I think you can do that with mental health, where that, you know, a lot of times you'll feel like you're making smaller and smaller progress with it. So, you know, when I got on my meds, it was like a huge jump. But then going from being on meds to being on meds and having better ways to cope with anxiety didn't feel like as much of a jump. And so the thing is, you're constantly improving, and it may not feel like you're getting anywhere at some point. You know, you're 100 terms into the series, and it's only like 3.
Yeah.
But know that if you just keep making these steps, no matter how small they may seem, it just balloons out, and you don't have like this peak.
This, I think this goes really well with a kind of theme I've noticed in college. Of course, this is the most nerdy thing. But, like, math teaches you about life.
Yeah.
Like, if you learn math and you learn... I guess just if you learn things, if you learn how to conceptualize things, not necessarily even problem solving, although, of course, that's still helpful, but if you just learn to think about the structures of the world, then you have better tools for thinking about things like mental health and living your life and interactions with friends and stuff. Like, that's one of the big ways I think that studying physics helps me, is that I get to learn to think of things as vectors, which is like, of course, sounds very nerdy and is very nerdy and isn't the only way of thinking about things, but it's definitely like a valid way and a helpful way, and something that I didn't kind of envision learning about as I went into college.
That's I mean, it even works for things that like most people don't consider nerdy, like with literary analysis, and writing papers. People are like, oh, it's just English, like, which is, I think, a very malformed concept. But you know, even if you take that, like, learning how to analyze motivations of characters within works is like, you now know how to analyze your own motivations. And so
it's like, holy shit, when you learn, you know more things.
Yeah, almost.
Still, yeah.
Well, and that's the thing, though. Is
I don't mean to put down what you're saying.
No,
I'm just
yeah, of
that
course.
It's in one framing, it's very obvious.
Yeah, but like learning with I'm in education classes right now, so I can become a teacher. And not only learning, but learning how to teach is like so interesting, because it also teaches me how to learn better. And so
is there like an example you have of that? I don't know how to conceptualize that.
Well, it like, so recently, like just this past class, well, more importantly, we've been talking about like how education can be disadvantaged to some people. So how African Americans and Asian Americans and you know, women and people with learning disabilities. I don't know if that's quite the PC term anymore, but I'm going to use it, and I'm sorry if it's not. Like, I'll try and redact this later if I learn the new hip term. But you know, those people have inherently different interactions with education, and on the surface, you go like, of course, you know, like, I know about racism, and I know about how, you know, people just learn differently. But what's really interesting is you'll hear these stories of, even in modern times, of people not like understanding that. Of there's a couple of years ago, some people in East Baton Rouge Parish in New Orleans, or in Louisiana, wanted to like secede and become the city of St. George, and it was a bunch of white people that were like, man, the school system sucks, and we just want the best for our kids, and we don't want busing anymore. And it's a lot of like, how can you not understand that like your actions fundamentally change other people? And then understanding that like those people don't see it that way, and having all these other diverse people in my class have like very different examples of stuff shows to me that like, oh right, I'm a white guy who has like a very fundamentally different learning experience, and that when I teach and even when I learn, like it's so different from other people.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Although of course I don't have much experience thinking about it because I'm not in the education classes.
Yeah,
but I can see, I think, the direction that's going in.
But I've said most of what I want to say on Farewell and how you learn stuff. I
think it's alright to have a pretty compact episode this time.
Yeah. Perhaps one last thing on it, like just outside of plot, is that I really appreciate how many extra things went into it. So there's a hidden special item that I'm not going to describe for people who don't want spoilers. And then there's also, you can find Madeline's car in the level.
I thought that's what you were talking about.
Well, no.
Oh, you're talking about the other thing. Yeah, okay.
And then there's also, you can find like a sound mixing station, and it also has just like little, fun bits in this kind of serious thing where you're like trying to catch the bird, and you walk into an internet cafe in your dreams and pull up a PowerPoint presentation that teaches you a new technique, one that's always existed in the game. And like for those of us that speedrun or that are really into the game, we already kind of figured out how to do it. But for those who just kind of have a casual experience, it teaches them this idea in a very new and interesting way. And like it's very lighthearted.
Yeah.
So I like the amount of care and devotion that went into Farewell is insane.
Especially with Lena Raine's soundtrack. Lena Raine? What is her name? Lena? Yeah, Lena Raine.
It's the soundtrack for Farewell is fucking crazy. And
it has this like really different sound than the rest of it, with a lot more emphasis on strings and drums, like seemingly acoustic for both of those. Or I don't know about drums, but acoustic strings. But the way that it incorporates Toby Fox-esque, I guess really Wagner-esque, the motifs from the rest of the game at pivotal points kind of drives home that you are using the same tools in a new context. And it's just like the songs are also very good. I think we're done here. Let's do our plugs, and then it's time for
me to suffer.
Yes.
So the subreddit r/Fools in Fiction is constantly open to criticism and trolls. Just comment on the recent episodes with ideas, thoughts, whatever you want. Maybe even suggestions. Suggestions and other things are also welcome at foolsinfiction@gmail.com. We're on the network in bold, italicized, underlined capital letters, which you can find at Finn. I don't. I'm sorry, the network gods.
It's in the show notes. So check out the link there. I think it's Spreaker.com/user/PNWM, but that could be wrong. Check the show notes.
Okay. And now
it is time.
It's the first time we've had a just the two of us podcast episode in quite some time, which means
it's time for haiku dream interpretation. So I haven't had a dream that I remembered in a while. I actually had one last night, and then I woke up in the middle of the night, and I'm like, I will remember this, and then I forgot. But I went back into my dream journal and found one that was more recent than the last one that we did.
Okay.
So I will read this to you, and then you must interpret it as haiku.
Yes.
We were in Minecraft, and if you fell off the map, you'd colorfully splat. Go.
Creative. No, alright. Creative thoughts mixed, or creative thoughts with fear of mortality in color. Is color one syllable or two?
Two.
Damn it. It depends on dialect, I think, but in color-filled space.
That was deep. You've done it.
Got him.
You're getting better. What if you could just gain this skill? And like now you can interpret everyone's dreams perfectly, but only in haikus, and they have to present them to you as haikus. It's like we can do like a modern version of Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat.
I would be very impressed if I gained that skill just from like shitposting constantly.
That's another one of the goals of the podcast.
Yeah, the true goal of the podcast is to create a podcastopolis.
Yeah.
But I think that's it for this episode. Join us next week when we have no fucking clue what we're doing like usual.
We might be talking about the When to See You.
Oh, God. We might. I have to catch up on it.
You've seen all of the When to See You.
Well, yeah, but catch up isn't refresh myself as to what fresh hell.
If you all haven't seen the When to See You, please watch it before next week's episode. In fact, just please watch it in general. It's so good. YouTube, the When to See You, all one word, except for the.
So 2 words.
You're right.
All right, I believe it's that time.
I and you.
Please, for the love of God, turn the podcast off.